All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the EMSDC's MBEIC webinar. I'm Joel Burstein, CEO and founder of Keep It Simple Training and Development. We specialize in sales, management, customer service, consulting, and training. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the MBEIC, it stands for the MBE Input Committee, and we represent the minority businesses on the EMSDC Board of Directors. Today, I'm joined by my two fellow MBEIC committee members and EMSDC board members. God, it really is a lot of alphabet soup, isn't it?
It's a lot.
It really is.
That's more than banking.
I'm telling you, we got to find a way to shorten this. My two board members, Reshma Murthy and Paul Douglas. Reshma Murthy is the president and CEO of Frontier Technologies, with the overall responsibility for the strategic direction, vision, values, and goals of the organization. She's driven with the purpose of customer value through tech innovation, as well as revolutionary and disruptive innovation. Paul Douglas is the president of the JPI Group. The organization strives daily to make the lives better for the partners they work with, the clients they support, and the communities they serve. JPI provides three core services to their customers: engineering services, recruiting solutions, and diversity solutions. In addition to our board members, we are honored to have a very special guest today, Cindy Costa, who is the Vice President, Business Development Manager of Chase Bank for the Pittsburgh expansion market. Funny thing is, Cindy, Paul, Reshma, and I sat on a panel back in 2019 at the Pittsburgh Roar Conference. Some of you may have been there. And most of you who were there probably forgot about it, but we had a lot of fun doing it. Our topic then was how to prepare your business for an economic downturn. We came up with that topic. We surely didn't expect, we didn't expect 2020, right? We didn't see that coming. So today we figured, let's try to reverse the fortune. Let's try to be a little bit ahead of the curve here and talk about how we're going to prepare your business finances for growth and expansion in the coming years. So hopefully a year from now, the economy will be in full-on growth mode. So let me share a quick history as to what got us to host this webinar. At the beginning of COVID, Paul, Reshma, and I realized that we were up against something unique and knew that we needed to support each other, in some unique ways to get through this. So we started to have regular meetings where we would talk through some different things and conversations to support each other. As we worked through some of our challenges, we realized that we really wanted to share this with the rest of the EMSDC membership. So we decided to create this webinar. They're fun, light, we try to have fun with this and talk about some different things. Everybody's going to be engaged with it. But before we get started, let me cover a few quick housekeeping items. Number one, it is going to be recorded. So we will share it afterwards. So if you missed something, feel free to check it out. Number two, save your questions to the end. We're going to have a question and answer session then. And when we do that, type your answers in or type your questions in the chat. And lastly, I'm going to put our everybody on the panel, their LinkedIn links in the chat in case you want to reach out to us, ask further questions afterwards, or engage with us in any way possible. So with that, let's get started. So the first question I have for everyone is, what's the one thing you would have done differently to shore up your finances had you had time to prepare for COVID? And, as the chairwoman of the MBEIC, Reshma, I'm going to start with you.
Sounds good. Thank you. You ask a very interesting question, Joel, and I was trying to think about how I would answer this question. And I kind of had to revert back to like the 2008, 2009 timeframe when the economy was tanking and a lot of changes were happening as well with the businesses, clearly due to different reasons. And at that moment, I can say that I learned from the past and those mistakes, and we were very active over the past like 8-10 years to make sure that we were in a position financially so we had backups. With that being said, I don't think there's any way that you can prepare for this. I mean, it was really tough for us, not necessarily from a financial perspective, but our clients completely stopped. I mean, like the interaction of business left, the needs that they needed kind of disappeared. Like everybody stopped. And I don't know if there's necessarily a key way to prepare for that, except that you have to keep your relationships alive. And I know I'll talk about that a little bit more later on this on the panel, but that's what we had to focus on, and that's how we had to adjust. So it was not necessarily a financial hit. It was related to just customers going blank and quiet, and that was tough to adjust.
Yeah, that I'm sure is a challenge for everybody, right? That one, just dealing with that engagement with your customer was such a unique experience. I think everybody had to take some time to adjust. How about you, Paul? What's one thing you might have done differently? I think you're still muted, Paul.
The goal was for me to be the first one for that to happen to, Joel. So thank you.
Congratulations, success.
That's what I'm here for. Yeah, I'm not sure who has kids when it's called, but I think we all tell our kids all the things they should do, right? Especially teenagers. And we also know that the kids don't listen to you, especially teenagers. I share that because we talked a lot about some really good topics back in 2019. And I'll be pretty candid. I think half of those things, we're so busy in the day-to-day, we don't get a chance to slow down and do any of those things, right? So I'll give you the one that I wish I would have done. We talk a lot about stress test, like a financial stress test. I don't know too many people that actually sit down and do a financial stress test on their business. However, looking back, I wish that was the one thing we did do, right? And the stress test is applicable to different industries. So I'll give some basic categories. I mean, something as simple as what's our banking relationship, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, right? What are some of our leading and lagging indicators? I can touch on that later, right? What impacts our business now? What's going to impact our business later? How diversified is our portfolio of business? We all say we want it, but how deliberately are we aligning that to the sales strategy? All those things I didn't do, right? We're doing it subjectively, right, as you go along, but to take the whole day and to plan that out, I wish I would have done that looking back. I think some of those things that I did inherently, but it wasn't deliberate, and that could have saved us some time and some stress from last year. But I agree, like Reshma said, none of us could plan for this. We didn't think this was going to happen, but I do think there's some things we can do to limit the stress and the impact it can have on the business.
I think it's a good point, right? Deliberate's a great word, right? We do these things, but a lot of times we do stuff just as it happens. We're not doing it intentional, right? And there is something to say for being deliberate and intentional with the actions and behaviors that we do on a regular basis. It's an interesting point, and we'll touch on the relationships again. Cindy, how about in your world? I mean, what are some of the things that probably maybe businesses should have done differently?
Well, I think Reshma and Paul really articulated you couldn't plan for it. However, you have to be conservative. As a small business in owning the business, what does conservative mean to you? Are you leveraging, Paul mentioned the banking relationship, and I know we're going to continue. You're going to hear it's like the common theme today is relationships. A stress test could be, does a banker know your financial situation today? Even though you're not applying for credit, can they look at your financials? Can they tell you what a loan packet looks like and what does that mean? Most institutions are happy to do that. They want to do that. They want to set you up for success so they can put your ducks in a row for you so that when the time comes, you can apply and you know exactly what it is a financial institution's looking at. And, the diversifying the portfolio of customers and suppliers and vendors, I think was the biggest lesson this time around with the pandemic. How strong are they and how were they going to survive the pandemic? Because it's really going to affect your business too. So I think all around it's relationships and keeping, what does conservative mean to you as a business owner when it comes to your financials?
Again, it's diversifying, your clients is a big deal. And unfortunately, right, when you start a business, we don't always have that luxury at the early stages to be diversified. It's something we get through growth. It's something we get as we continue to grow. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to slip into not being diversified. And when you think about diversification, sometimes it's about not just in diversified in having different, like a multiple, but having different business lines, different business mm-hmm. units that you're working with, right? Having different sectors that you cross over to, right? If possible, right? And so it's an interesting point. Cindy, you service accounts that are between the $5 and $20 million range. So what tips do you have for business owners to help them sort of acquire the capital that they may need now or in the future?
Oh, I would take a hard look at where your ongoing sustainable cash flow is coming from. I know when we were chatting earlier as a group, and what I've been talking to my customers about is, yeah, COVID, maybe you did really good during COVID. Maybe takeout orders, or you were able to shift and make masks, and you actually did okay during COVID. That could be scary too to somebody who's lending money, because that sustainable? Is that something that's going to happen next year, in 3 years? Most banks, financial institutions, do not use forecasts when it comes to underwriting. It's usually present day and past. I have, with my customers, just been asking them, and most controllers and CFOs do a forecast just for themselves, just to make sure that, we set goals so that we have something to try to work towards. And that's really what a forecast is. But I would recommend doing a forecast. It's a little bit of hard work, more work. And that way you can kind of see, if a pandemic would hit again, where are your expenses? Where is your revenue coming from? Oh, how strong is that company? How are they doing? Are they diversifying their portfolio? And they're going to continue to buy from me? And what services can I add because of based off of your specialty, what can I add that can help with the cash flow? So I think forecasting is a really big and different type of look at your business. And then understanding the customers, suppliers, vendors. And then I'm just going to go right back to the relationships that you have with your CPA, your attorney, and your bank. And so when I'll speak specifically to the bank piece of it, you could be in that startup to $1 million in sales and revenues. You could be in that $1 to $5 million in sales and revenues. Joel, you mentioned that my portfolio is in that 5 to 20. You ought to know somebody who's trained in business banking, and not the teller. Like, the teller is not the person who's going to help you when it comes to finances. As much as we love that person, it is going to be somebody who is trained in business banking, and that should be your first ask. There are customers who have been with the same institution for a very, very long time and don't want to see their banker. Maybe you feel like they're going to sell you something. It's different today. Take that call. Let them come in. Let them learn about your business and understand who you are, because a big key right now is, how are you managing your company? When we talked back in 2019, we also discussed who's your banker, right? So we talked about I forget. I've just totally lost my train of thought. In 2019, I was like, wow, that was not too long ago, but it feels like forever ago. But
2020 counts as 3 years, Cindy.
3 years. Yikes. Feels like a lot longer. Like, I don't know. Living in these four walls, I think I aged quickly. It's just relationships. Get to know your banker. Allow them to understand who you are. Because if you survived 2008 and 2009, that time frame as a small business, you've gained a lot of credibility of how you're going to survive this pandemic. But the underwriters and approving officers that get a loan packet need to understand the character of the person running this business. And if you're on this call, most likely you are the heart and soul of the company and you're running it. That was a lot. I said a lot in that question, Joel, but it would come down to forecasting, knowing your supplier vendors, and know your banker, and have a stress test. Have them do a little, hey, here's my loan. Here's a loan packet. What do you see? Tell me what you see, the cash flow and stuff. So there you go.
Well, no,
I get very excited.
We can tell. It's great. It's, somebody has to, right? It's funny because we've talked about relationships, and although we planned this out, you three have gone and really pushed on this relationship topic. So I'm going to skip questions now on you. So now we're going to move in a different direction. Oh, Reshma, wow. I'm going to you. You're going to have to. Yeah, I'm changing this up now, but I'm asking you the questions, right? We're going to talk about the relationships, but we had talked about early on. You and I got on the phone and we talked about these PPP loans, like early on. And, we were sort of concerned as we talked to each other about it. Like, we weren't really telling the world we got PPP loans because, candidly, there were so many folks that hadn't. And you and I sort of realized something interesting, that the folks who got those PPP loans almost within a week, 2 weeks, a very, very short time frame, had really strong established relationships. Right. With their banks, and we started to talk about how this relationship has affected your business. How has these relationships with your banker really impacted you all?
I think for us, and I'm sure it's not like the answer for everybody, but for us, we were very lucky in the sense that we had a good relationship with our bank. We've had a good relationship with them since we switched over from another bank to this one for about 4 or 5 years now. And that was one of the biggest things. And sometimes I know the questions get a little intrusive and you're figuring out, why are they asking you these questions? Like, what are they trying to get at? Are they questioning me as a business owner and how I'm doing things? And it's not. I rather them know so much more about our business, understand what we're doing, who we're the clients that we're serving, because that's going to allow them to do a better job for me. And I think that's a big misnomer that I hear is people don't want to open up, which I get. I get it. But at some point you have to trust and believe in the process. And so with that, we have been very fortunate to have good relationships, have different things considered. You know, we're at a point where now the bank's considering taking off collateral, right, on our lines of credits, for example. And we wouldn't have gotten to that point if we weren't able to really trust the process and allow that true banking relationship full thrive. And that's what I think is the biggest thing for us in our relationships. And that's how we've been successful today. And just knowing that they're there in our corner. Should we need them, they respond, they jump on the call, and they answer our needs, and other banking needs as well, you know, not specifically related to lines of credits. So it's imperative.
But a relationship's a two-way street. So you've been welcoming and you've been transparent, and so has the relationship you have with the bank. And that's the key too. It has to be, you have to both be all in on the relationship.
Yes. Yes. And you can tell. I mean, you can tell when they don't care, they're not returning your calls. I mean, all the same things, right? It's like sales. You're trying to call people and they don't call back. So
it's here's some irony as we're talking. My banker is texting me. I asked him, like, hey, did you guys have a 25% loss at any quarter last year? Because our system isn't open yet for only CDFIs, a small business can do loans. But as soon as we're open, let me know. We can get you guys in early. This is like, I can't show the name. It's Cindy. I'm joking.
Sounds very similar.
Yeah, I won't show the name, but Cindy, I'm sure you know that. Like, you guys can't do the loan yet. You're a big bank. Only the CDFIs and the small business, small banks can. But they're like, hey, you guys, we have the system ready to go. We can hit go tomorrow. So get everything ready. That's a live example of having a banker that's someone that, back to maybe answer your question, Joel, it's taken us a while to build that rapport. It didn't happen overnight. Like, we've known her for almost 3 years now, and she knows the ins and outs of our company, right? Every loss we've had, every win we've had, bad credit, good credit, everything she knows. So she's always able to provide us that insight. And that's a great point you made, Rash, but sometimes I think we're very hesitant
absolutely
to open our books. And that's what can hurt us. And I can share examples where sometimes we've held some things back and it always comes out, right? It's your financials, right? So it doesn't matter what you hold back, it always comes out on paper. So build a rapport. It takes time to do so, but you have to start somewhere. And once you do, with the right person, they'll help you. So I wanted to share that. Ironically, what's happened is we're literally on the phone talking about relationships.
We know what's funny is, and I think people underestimate the emotional aspect of applying for credit. I mean, like, and I mean this, right? Anybody's ever bought a house, right? It's an invasive process. I mean, it is, right? And candidly, you know, when you started a business, you're a business owner. I mean, it's like it's a baby to you. I mean, this is a part of your life. This is like an extension of your body, right? And it's invasive. And so sometimes I genuinely think, and some clients we work with, just it's hard to even get over it where you're going to make that call or start to have that conversation because you feel so unprotected, invaded, and just going through it and questioned, right? Like this process. You're laughing, Cindy, because you know what I mean. But like it's this questioning, and you're like, wait a second, of course I'm doing that, right? Of course, right? And it's so you know it's tough, and I think sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit that it is going to be a bit of a turmoil to get through this, but it affects us. It affects all of us.
Yeah.
So let me jump to this question then. So Cindy, let me go back to you real quick. you know, we talked about the business owners and surrounding ourselves with the right professionals, right? And Paul sort of gave a really great example of like, I just got this request, right? That's exactly what we should be expecting from the professionals we hire, right? We should expect that proactive. What in your opinion, what else should we be expecting from our bankers, or should we be expecting from the professionals you guys work with to help get that financial situation in a position where we can start getting the credit we need?
Some of my best relationships that I don't necessarily, they're not my customers, are CPAs. So when your CPA is looking at your business, are they paying attention to fees? Are they paying attention to rates? What's being held as a collateral? Are they guiding you on different regulations that are hitting the industry because, the PPP loans, how do we write that off? How do we do that? Or are you thinking about your, forecasting? They can help you forecast too, right? In addition to that, I think an attorney. I know that I have a lot of great friends that work with small businesses that are attorneys and or supply HR services. And there's a lot going on around COVID and vaccinations. And if you're an employer, what are your choices? What if you have an employee who doesn't get vaccinated? I mean, there's so many layers with this. And you need to focus on creating revenue and building relationships that you hope that the folks like your CPA and your attorney are bringing this to your attention and helping to remove blinders and or just making you think outside the box of how things are different today. If you're not hearing from them, do they know what's happening, what's going on today, and what changes? Hopefully they'll be proactive, but if they're not, I think you have every right to call them and say, hey, what should I be thinking about right now with HR? I have 15 employees. Like, what am I going to need to think about? What's healthcare look like? What does this vaccination look like? Forecasting, asking your CPA, can you help me put a forecast together based off of today? And then let's set some goals so that I can really make sure that I am doing everything I need to do to save my business and support the customers, right? So, I think I don't want to talk about banking anymore, but I do think it's a really important piece of that circle. And when you have your accountant or CPA and the attorney and the bank all working on your behalf, that we've said it for years, but I think more now than ever, that is a really strong wall that you put around yourself. And I think being a part of this group and everybody that's on this call is having friends that are small business owners too is really, really impactful for you to have that. We always call it best friend at work type of mentality, but have that person who's living and breathing what you're going through and coming together and talking about things that you're doing, almost like the three of you did and ongoing, because sometimes we can have blind spots and only a good friend or a coach can or mentor or whatever can remove those blind spots the best. So I think that if you have those four in your pocket, you can feel good about going to work every day and do what you do best and having them look out for you. That's my recommendation.
I think you made a good point in there too, right? Which was, about asking your professionals too, right? And I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, there's lots of times I question my accountant in a way like, hey, I saw this, I read this, like, can we do this? And candidly, he'll look at it and go, yeah, actually, that was a good, right? I would tell you at least 85% of the time, he's like, that's a stupid idea, doesn't apply to you. But it's worth it for the other 15%. And I think sometimes we're not always comfortable asking our professionals and really questioning like we should, right? That they can't know everything. So anything with banking or accounting or anything of this sort is typically filled with regulations and rules and rule changes, right? Like this PPP is different than the last PPP. And so everybody's trying to learn it. I think it never hurts us to ask, right? To really kind of dig deeper and start bringing up some of these conversations. But Reshma, I saw you go off mute. Did you have something you wanted to add to that?
I did. I was just going to mention, just kind of go off on the forecasting, because at one point, that was really foreign to us. And again, as we've made a lot of different accounting updates and just changes to our own accounting infrastructure, that was one of the things where, we just instituted creating the budgets. And so from the budgets is where now we are able to do the forecasting. And that I found extremely helpful. I don't know if that's what other people are doing, but I'm just sharing something that I learned. I went, oh, I didn't even think about that, because that's how you do it. Because forecasting, you can do it more within your quarters now that you know X amount of results. So there's ways that you can do that. And then just wanted to tell Cindy, like in my experience with our banker, they actually are really interested in learning more about our forecast, and that actually affects some of the things that they can do for us. And so, that again, and that could vary by relationship too, right? But for us, that seems to work well by giving them the forecast. But you're right, a lot of it, they still want to see what was done, like what's present and what was just recently done, to then justify what they can.
The forecasting is proving that the management and the owner of the company gets it. You get it. You realize that it's not the same today, and that just helps with managing risk where your loans are underwritten from current past numbers. Yep.
Yeah.
It's good.
Okay.
It's funny. The forecasting is key for us as well, and it's going to be a pretty dynamic forecast. It's going to be, instead of just for the entire year, it's going to be quarter over quarter, because hopefully things don't change too often. But I think two other things to consider, and I talked about this earlier in the stress test, that we're really focused on are just leading and lagging indicators, right? And that's key for me. So when I say leading indicators, maybe I'll start with lagging. Lagging is your net income, your bottom line, your profit. I mean, those are things that happen down the line, right? Those are things that it comes from the effort today, and then I'll see it in March. We've done an okay job with it. I think that's one of my top priorities this year, is to really understand all of the leading indicators. And leading indicators will vary by industry. So I have leading indicators for my sales team, our recruiters, and our engineering services. And I know exactly what those ratios or percentages need to be week over week. And from that, I can also tie that to our P&L statement, right? And from our P&L statement, I can then create our forecast. That's the connection, again, that we've done it very loosely over the years. But this year, it's much more lockstep. And the minute that I see something dropping below a benchmark, below a threshold, I can then put my thumb on the dial and say, hey, what's going on here? If something were to happen, we could really be in the red. Or, hey, there's a big opportunity for us. So it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Again, it could be food. I'm sure there's a customer KPI, right? It could be customer service. It could be cleaning, recruiting, IT. We all have our KPIs, but I think sometimes we focus on net income, profit, revenue. That's lagging. That's months, whatever you did 3 months ago. What I did last quarter is impacting me now, not what I did last week. So keeping that thought process was just key for us. And I'm sure that ties right back to forecasting, lines of credit, and everything we're discussing today.
Paul, who helped you with that? Who kind of helped guide you?
My CPA made us do it.
Yeah.
Right. So he said, hey, guys, going into this year. In fact, we have a meeting at the end of this quarter with our chief operating officer, our third-party CPA, and our leadership team to review that budget, make sure the ratios align to our industry ratios. And we haven't done that before. So that's our first time actually sitting down and really defining those ratios, those benchmarks, which will only allow us to make quicker, more decisive decisions going forward.
And Cindy, we typically work with our CFO. And so it's interesting because the CPA is just doing one aspect of the business. And again, one of the things that I've learned through this whole past year in this process is, yes, you need multiple people, because your CPA can help you with your accounting and tax, but then you depend on your CFO to help you with your forecasting, giving you some of those ratios for us. I mean, that's how it worked out for us, because we weren't able to lean on just one resource. So having those relationships and like building your team around you has been very key for us, right? To remind you as like CEOs on this call, all the things that you need to consider.
Yeah. And I would say if you're, a startup or in that, micro space of maybe $500,000 to $1 million in sales and revenues, there are small business development centers. I know in Pittsburgh, you have some of the colleges that host them, and they help you with that kind of stuff too. So there are resources if you're not in that 5 to 20 million space that I think are underutilized sometimes, but I think they're going to be more utilized today more than ever if you've got the right team telling you to do this. So look for the SBDCs in the area. And, you're talking about capital and help. There are micro lenders. Every county has micro lenders, and they do up to like $50,000 and you just need a business plan and a forecast. So there are resources for startups and or companies that are, under $1 million in sales and revenues that maybe aren't as sophisticated yet, but still want to keep going. Please keep going. Don't give up. Please keep going. I feel like every 10 years, small business gets hit with something or other, but we're so resilient. That's why I love what I do. And my customer base is, you're resilient. You figure it out, and we keep going because we can. And so don't forget about those small business development centers and the micro lenders in the communities. Counties, they're all usually county based.
That's a good point, Cindy, and I think that sort of leads to sort of the next question, right? It sort of, how, if at all, has COVID sort of impacted the small business owner when they're applying for credit?
Every piece of it, every angle. You go to buy a house. Oh, you're a small business owner. Your income's coming from your own business. Okay, now here's a laundry list we need for that. It's I think somebody said invasive, like you just are like, why are you questioning me? Because they need to know, any lender needs to know that you're able to pay the debt back and there's an ongoing sustainable income. And so like Paul said, like the legs, your net income and your profit that comes, that's why you usually give 3 years history when you're doing a loan packet and you're only forecasting 6 months, right? So there's trends that financial institutions look at and want to know where you're trending for 2021. And that's why the forecast is even more important, kind of gives a forward look. But you have to really be able to articulate your relationships, not just the numbers. There's a lot of questions that are like, well, if your business can't pay back the debt, are you willing to personally throw money into this? Like your banker may ask you that question because they want to know if you're going to partner pretty much with the institution in hopes that, we don't get to that point, but are you going to back this line as well? There's so much. I just be prepared to be able to articulate your accounts receivables, and anybody who's a concentration, there's going to be some heavy look into that concentration. And if you have somebody that's representing you to the underwriter, they're going to dive into that concentration. And maybe inside that company, there's 6 lines that they're using from you. So, but there's no way to know that if it's just a name on an accounts receivables and amount. Managing that accounts receivable so that you're getting your payments under 90 days. Things like that. Your suppliers and vendors. If you're a company that has one supplier and that supplier doesn't make it, who's your backup? And what kind of relationship in terms are you going to be able to have with that supplier? So things haven't really changed. What the requirements are, it's on steroids.
Hey, Cindy, I wanted to, you and I, we've talked in the past about this. It's a little bit, it's one of those things we don't really talk about publicly, but we talked about taxes. Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes taxes being one of the, I don't know the percentage, but it can be a significant reason why sometimes loans can't proceed the way we want. Could you speak to that a little, just from your experience?
Sure. And yeah, so you could be a company that's been around for 20 years and you're doing really, really well. But we have to be able to prove that you have the income coming in and the revenues coming in, and it has to be a taxable item. So it has to be on your tax return, your 1120, your 1120S, your whatever. It has to show, because that's what we're using to say that this is the income coming in to pay the debt. And it's really, really difficult when you say something to your banker like, I make money, I just don't put it on the tax return. We're so heavily regulated. Every institution is, you have to be able to show that you have income to pay the debts and where the revenue is going. Put it back in the business, open up a 401k plan. That's a way there's ways to be strategic in keeping money in the business and leveraging for your employees and yourself. But it has to be proven incomes and proven revenues to show that the income coming in can support the debt that you have currently, in addition to the requested debt. Really, really important. That's cash flow.
And I think you have to be a couple of years in advance on that too, right? You have to be thinking about what's the tax return I'm going to show next year, year after, right? I mean, this planning, right? It's not just about doing well in your business when you're looking for credit. I mean, remember, you are asking people for money. I mean, I'm pretty sure I got family members right now that would come to me and go, "Hey, Joel, I need some money. You might get some questions on the way to me reaching in my pocket," right? And I think when you're running your business, right, it's strategically thinking about, okay, I might need money next year or the year after. What do I need to do today? And this goes to Paul's leading and lagging indicators, right? Getting credit, getting that loan is really a lagging indicator. The leading indicators in this case are, what do I need to do in order to shore up my business so that I get that credit next year, which is really the purpose of this whole conversation is, I'm going to need it next year too. I'm going to want to come out of it. There might be other opportunities, we're going to see things, and I want to be ready to take advantage of the opportunities as they come up.
Yeah. A lot of conversations I'm having today, and I just had one earlier, is I'm collecting loan packet, and I'll sit down, not these days we'll Zoom. And once I get a loan packet, I'll look over, I will look at how it's cash flowing and what the strengths are and what the weaknesses are. And together with my customer, figure out what it is we're looking for and what we're going to have, how we're going to have to mitigate some of the risk. And then, placing it through the channel to get an underwriter to look at it. And we call them credit approving officers. We want to approve credit, right? So it really is teamwork, more now than ever in the relationship, and being able to trust the person that's helping you with your business. Let them help you understand the financial institution and what we look at. And there are a lot of ratios that we look at, like quick ratios, current ratios. We look at all of those. And you're allowed to know what we're seeing and talk about it. I think it's awesome. And some people said, "I've never had this before." I'm like, "Well, you're having it now." I don't want to know all this. Too bad. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Just talking about it and showing the financials.
Yeah. Paul, you came off of mute. I didn't know if there was anything you had.
No, I was
Okay.
just giving Cindy reinforcement for what she was saying. That's all.
So let me, we're going to start opening this up to some questions in a couple of minutes. So let me wrap up with a question for everybody. Just kind of Paul, Reshma, what are you doing with your finances today to ensure that you come out of the crisis in growth mode? Are you doing anything differently? And Cindy, the question is going to be slightly different for you, going, what should we be doing today to move forward? But as I did in the beginning, Reshma, I'll start with you.
Sure. We're really focusing on just, again, the relationships. I have calls weekly with the CFO, making sure I'm getting the reporting, trying to figure out the things for the next 4 or 5 years. So we have some goals, working with the CPA as well in terms of, okay, this is what we're doing, that tax planning, like you said, and in terms to show certain amount of growth, things that we know the bank wants to see, we're taking a very proactive approach and doing those things and putting them in place. Okay, this is what we'll do for 2019, 2020, and all the way up to 2025. So we have an idea of how to show growth. Bank sees that. Oh, they're like, oh, okay, we can invest more. We can give you more, credit to your line of credit, whatever that may be. And also just, and with that, tax planning and just how to be smarter, be prepared, adjust certain things to reflect different things. We're taking a very tactical and strategic approach for the next 4 or 5 years for our business. And with that, hopefully, put us in a position where if something like this could happen again, which we never know, we'll be okay. So.
Makes a lot of sense. Paul, how about you?
I mean, I to echo the same things. We've kind of given the core answers, right? But I will maybe start with one thing we haven't talked about too much. We said we need to diversify our business. There are a couple of industries, they're not recession proof, but they're close to it, right? Government, utility, energy, healthcare, they're going, and they tend to continue to go unless there's a drastic issue. So one thing we're doing is being much more intentional and deliberate about being in those industries, right? We're also looking at the new administration and figuring out what are going to be their initiatives. And we're making sure that we align to it from a strategic perspective on the types of work that's going to come up. So that's the strategy side of it. And that's something that we're doing it from a big picture standpoint. The lead and lag, I'm going to keep saying lead and lagging indicators, but that the KPIs, the forecasting, that's key. I think it doesn't matter if you're 2 people or 200. you can still do that exercise and it will still allow you to sleep at night and knowing where you stand as an organization, right? And I would say probably last but not least, we talked about the relationships. Relationships don't happen overnight, right? I do a lot of sales, and I mean, Joel does that sales training, so he knows it 10 times more than I do. It's repeated conversations, right? It's openness, it's candor, it's sometimes going through some tough conversations and getting through it, and then you get a relationship. So that's going to take some time. We talked a lot about relationships today. I don't know if Cindy, if you could probably even share with the team, how do you find a local banker? How do you start it? Because sometimes we can talk about it, but never tactically say, what do you do? So I would love to maybe even ask you that question. If we have folks on this call that says, hey, how do I find a banker? And what do I say to at least get the conversation going? I think that's a great thing. I'm going to continue our relationship, but I also think it's good to have maybe two, right? Not having your eggs in one basket with one banker is something you need to consider. So those are my tips and things that we plan on doing this year, more precisely.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Paul. Cindy.
Well, it's hard to follow both of those. So I stamped both of those. We talked about it for the most part. And so I think customers, prospects, how close are you to these customers? And if you're in an industry that they have choices, why are they going to continue to choose from you? Because at the end of the day, all of us are nothing without our customers. We have nothing. So get close to them. I loved what Paul had said about customers and being strategic on where you're going to find prospects and what industries are thriving right now. I think that's spot on. And I would say protect yourself. Find out, protect yourself. I don't know who does your HR. Some small businesses do everything. The business owner is the CFO, the CEO, the HR person. So a lot of Paychex providers have that additional service. Can you get a fractional CFO for a little bit of a time? There are a lot of resources out there that can help you protect yourself too. And with everything changing with laws and regulations and employees and HR perspective, it's really important to protect yourself. So then I'll address Paul. How do you find a banker? So every branch, no matter what bank you're at, has a branch manager. I would start there and ask if you can sit down with them and have a conversation. Most times, a lot of transactions don't happen at branches. Appointments happen at branches, and that's what people are making appointments for, is just to sit down and have a review and ask them before making that appointment if they're familiar with business banking. And if they're not, is there somebody that can join the meeting? So a lot of times, some banks, depending where you're at, the branch manager is very versed in business banking and personal. A lot of times they're just used to personal. So just ask those questions and set an appointment and be prepared. Bring financials if they ask for it, or a list of questions that you think they're going to ask is, how are you doing? Who's your customer? Like all the things we just talked about. How can they help you? Some who are probably $1 million more in sales and revenues, I would hope has somebody that calls upon them. Maybe they called once and didn't call again, because some bankers take over 150 clients when they come to an institution. So again, the branch manager typically knows who's in that market and what line of business could be covering your account and can help you find that person. But don't stop. There's somebody. Don't stop. You'll find somebody and connect with them and start the relationship.
Appreciate it, Cindy. Thank you.
Yeah,
that was fantastic. And I would agree with everybody. And I would say, on our end, we are focusing on being very intentional with diversifying our client base. And I say that from a sales perspective. We are purposefully prospecting businesses and areas we do not have access to right now. We are asking for referrals and introductions into businesses we don't have access to. The lesson learned over the last year was you really cannot have too many different business lines in your clients, right? Like they're just, because you can't predict this. You couldn't have predicted this. Every so often we have a catalyst that creates an economic downturn. We didn't know this would be the catalyst, and that catalyst created unique challenges that I don't think we knew. So I agree with everybody. With that being said, let's throw out some questions. There is one question in there that I have. I'll read that one. But go ahead and put some questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer them. The first question I saw is says I'm in the area of real estate, and it appears that banks are primarily focused on taxable income rather than cash flows. So oftentimes underwriting doesn't look at the rate of returns. How can I connect with underwriters to explain or present the reality?
That's a loaded question. I will tell you generally in high level, we're looking at income coming in and expenses going out. So not necessarily taxable income, but how much money do you have coming in every month and how much money is going out? And with the debt that you're looking for, are you going to be able to service that? Most banks have a ratio. They like you to, I think the common one that I've seen is for every dollar borrowed, you have $1.25 reserved. Like this ratio, right? So I would say looking at your financials, it's great that you have a portfolio of real estate. I think real estate still continues to be a strong asset, but are you having an ROI and are you showing that ROI to service the debt? Now, if it's investment real estate, the bank may go an extra layer and say, you have a portfolio of investment real estate, how long are the leases? Who are your renters, and go even further into that, and what's the flight risk. Now, COVID has a lot of risk with real estate right now if it's commercial space used and it's not being occupied, right? So like right now, I'm still working from my home, unfortunately. So I think that when you're thinking about risk, there is I think there's risk there on making sure that you, as the owner of the real estate, is getting paid, and not so much are you going to be able to pay the bank back too. So being able to show that and articulate that from your financials that you're reporting or audited or reviewed or have filed. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Cindy. I saw another question here. I just want to make sure I understood it properly. It looks like it says somebody asked about info on funding for new businesses, references to program workshop applications. I assume they're looking for, go ahead.
So I said the SBDCs, they're
Mhm.
small business development centers. Now I know our audience is not just Pennsylvania, I'm sitting in Pittsburgh. So small business development centers are located within your communities. For example, here in Pittsburgh, Pitt has one, Duquesne has one, Chatham has one. And you can find them and you can register, and they absolutely teach you how to build a business plan to forecast and understand lending at financial institutions. They usually have an attorney that's there, a banker that's there, which is absolutely fantastic. The SBA, I'm very well connected to the SBA here in Pittsburgh, and she and I just had a conversation. And what's being underutilized right now for startups are these micro lenders. And I mean, they can lend up to $50,000 unsecured, and you don't need to have historic cash flows. You need to have a business plan, and you have to be very serious with it, right? But they are in every county has their own micro lender, and you can Google that. And a lot of SBA.gov has a ton of information. Right now, the first thing you see is PPP stuff. But if you dive into their website, the SBA.gov has a ton of information for startups and funding for those who may not have a historic cash flow history to support loans. Highly recommend it.
I got another question here for you. It says, we're just starting out. My question is, should we take out a small business loan, a grant, or use resources we have collectively?
I think that's a real personal question, in my opinion. I will say, however, that financial institutions they're not investors. So it goes back to the micro lenders. So financial institutions support a cash flow and understand the need for working capital. And so if you're starting off, you just have to be able to show ongoing, sustainable cash flow that's going to service the debt from the operating entity that you have, which is really, really difficult because you're just starting off. So that's where the micro loans come into play. Because if you're starting off and you need some capital to get the business up and running, The micro lenders in your counties through the SBA, absolutely, that's what they're there for. That they can help you. If you're putting money into your company, you can talk with your CPA and even your attorney. And is that a loan to the company, and does the company pay you back? That's a question you can ask.
Absolutely.
Hopefully
Paul?
that helps.
Thanks.
I was just going to say, if you're just starting off, just make sure you have a plan for how you plan on turning that X amount of dollars into revenue in the short time period. So if I mean, again, I'm not a banker, but I would imagine if you're going to take a loan out, it's to deliver on a product or service that you already have in process. I wouldn't take it out to get started, will be my personal opinion. I think sometimes just if you're not careful, you could be having a ton of loan, ton of debt, and not enough revenue coming in. So just look at your business plan, look at your leading indicators, right? Like, what do I need to measure? What's my forecast? And if I did take out $50,000, like, how will I be able to show that in my P&L 12 months from now as ROI? So it's, you do need funding to get started, right? And people fund their business over and over again, but just make sure you do it with a plan in mind.
And I would add, when I started this business, I had to really evaluate. I came from finance, really evaluated the interest rates between all the different products and what my cost of capital was, because I knew that was just going to increase the amount of time it took me to pay it off. When you're starting off, you don't really have a lot of flexibility. You're not usually getting the best rates, but you can be careful, right? Credit cards tend to have the worst possible rates across the board, as far as I know of. Cindy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. As far as carrying it, if you weren't going to pay it off every month, right?
Yeah.
Where potentially a microloan might have a higher rate than a bank loan, but still significantly less than maybe a credit card.
Credit card. Unsecured debt is going to be your highest risk, whether it's credit card or micro lender loan. So it's going to have the largest rate. Credit cards are like a double-edged sword. It's great if you do have a company and you need something to track the expenses and you want to start building credit for that tax ID, for that business name. Credit cards are phenomenal for that. However, the idea is to pay it off every month. So instead of writing checks to these expenses that you have, can you use a business credit card in the business name? A lot of times those credit cards, and this is a great question to ask when applying, does that credit card, if you're a small business owner, that credit card underwriting is going to go back to you and check your personal credit to make sure that you are managing credit properly. But most times, and this is a perfect question to ask, most times that debt that you get approved for, so maybe you get a $20,000 credit card, is that going to show up on you personally, or does it, or does it only show up on you personally when you default on it, for over and over again? That's a very, very important question to ask when doing a credit card for the business name. They will check you personally, but will it show up on you personally? If you go to buy a house, is that exposure there? Hopefully the answer is no, and that's what you're looking for, because there are a lot of great business cards out there that will look at you personally, make sure you can manage your debt, but the exposure does not show up under you personally, and that is a good thing. That's what you want.
Reshma, I saw you come off of mute. I didn't know if you had anything to add to that.
You were just talking about lines of credits and different things, and I didn't know if this would be the right time. And just the amounts that SBA will back a loan, and then when it kind of transfers over to a commercial line of credit and different things like that. I didn't know if that was clear, or if you wanted to talk about just what those limits were. It was something that I was just thinking about that I thought would be applicable for this session based on everything we're talking about.
Yeah. I could touch upon it at a very high level. Most institutions have an SBA BDO. Oh my gosh, I sound like you, Joel. They have an SBA BDO, Small Business Administrator, Business Development Officer, for larger credits around SBA. I think it's a great option if you are approved for credit to ask, what would this look like through the lens of the SBA? And so with the SBA, they have a couple different programs. They have a SBA Express. I'm going to give you these names so you can do more Google research. They have SBA Express loans. They have 7A loans, and they have 504s. And what the SBA does, and they've been around forever with the banks, is they partner with the bank and they do an SBA guarantee. So what are the things that we look for? Cash flow, collateral, credit score, right? And industry and management. So if your collateral is a little bit short from conventionally, would the SBA make it a stronger deal for you? If you want to put less cash in, sometimes the SBA allows you to do up to 90% financing in some cases, and less cash in, more money in pockets. A lot of times you can finance the fees with the SBA. So each institution has an SBA BDO that when you're applying for credit, it's always good to see if that institution will give you the conventional C and the SBA look, because they supply both, and it doesn't take much for them to say, this is what it looks like conventionally if you fit in this box, or this is what it looks like at the SBA, because a lot of times conventional loans have a hard term, 20 years, 10 years, or balloons, right? Where the SBA can go out to 25 years, a little bit further, helping your month-to-month cash flow. So it's always good to ask for a comparison for SBA and conventional lending. Now, I was mentioning the SBA micro lenders. They're not banks. These are nonprofit organizations in your counties that have these funds that the SBA supplies to these micro lenders that are nonprofits for startups and small micro businesses. And their max is $50,000. So that is outside of business at a financial institution. I just probably didn't make that clear, but that was a great question.
Thanks, Cindy. So we have about 2 minutes left, so I will go ahead and wrap this up. Cindy, Reshma, Paul, thank you. I appreciate it. You guys were great as usual. You're welcome. I want to thank everybody for making the time today to join us. If you have any questions, want to learn a little bit more about any of us, or have any questions about what we're doing, please don't hesitate to connect with us on LinkedIn. The LinkedIn profiles are out there. Also, if you have any questions, need any help with any banking, we highly recommend Cindy and Chase. They are, they have the Advancing Black initiatives as well, that you probably have seen if you remember the EMSDC. I know the NMSDC has been pushing that out there. But if you have any questions or need any more information, please don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.